So Michigan finally opened the NIL war chest that their fans had been begging for years. It was a part of the reason why Harbaugh was struggling to recruit, is that him and Ward Manuel were reportedly not very big on NIL. And then Sherrone Moore gets in. He's more in on the whole pay-for-play thing. And he riled up the donors, got them connected, and Michigan landed Bryce Underwood. And that was history. Now, Michigan didn't have this awesome year. In fact, it was pretty disgusting. I can safely say that Michigan's year received an F or a D grade. With the NFL talent they had, I mean, think about it. Think if Michigan got Jaden Mayava instead of USC, or if they got Kyle McCord instead of Syracuse, or what if Michigan got Will Howard and Ohio State kept Kyle McCord, or they got Cam Ward in the portal. Michigan probably goes 10-2 last year if they get any of those quarterbacks, especially McCord or Will Howard. And they probably, at least win an additional game or probably two with Mayava. They were that bad at quarterback, and yet they had a generational defensive line. They had a good DB room even without Will Johnson by the end of the year. Linebackers got way better as the year went on. The defense was playing at a top 5 level, an elite level at the end of the year, although it had a very rough start and at one point wasn't even top 25. The O-line, I thought, was pretty good in run blocking, very suspect in pass blocking, and of course Michigan had Colston Loveland. So finishing 7th in the Big Ten, 8-5, 5-4, and winning the ReliaQuest Bowl is kind of closer to vomit or diarrhea in terms of, an analogy for the season than it is to, wearing the crown or earning a bronze or silver medal. But Michigan has momentum. The win over Ohio State and to a lesser degree Alabama meant something. And quarterback was Michigan's biggest weakness last year, along with wide receiver. And they've at least, in theory, solved one of those in the 2025 recruiting class, which was, I believe, 6th or maybe even 5th. It was around 6th in the 2025 rankings, and it was 8th when you factored in the portal, where Michigan, I think, much like Ohio State, they brought in some guys, some quality guys. Michigan also brought in some, I think, just depth bodies, but they didn't go all in. I don't think. I think Michigan, much like some other teams, views 2026 as more of their year, and I think that's something that's going to be fairly common in college football moving forward, is because teams are thinner. This isn't the 2010s or the early 2020s where you can stack talent anymore, and you can be 2 or 3 deep. That's not what this is, with rare exception, like Ohio State's wide receiver room, for example, or, to a lesser degree, Michigan's defensive tackle and maybe entire D-line last year. You're going to start to see teams target certain cycles and put targets on specific years rather than trying to achieve the same thing over and over and over again. Of course, as it moves to more, not exactly an NFL format, because right now college football is much more chaotic than the NFL, but it will move, I think, towards more of an NFL vision. That's why, general managers are now a huge thing in college football. But what I want to do, first and foremost, is I want to look at Michigan through the lens of Bryce Underwood. Or maybe that's the wrong way of putting it, but I want to evaluate Michigan specifically as Michigan relates to Bryce Underwood. So the Wolverines this year, just analyzing them briefly, making a thesis statement on Michigan. Michigan football is a team that will stop the run. They will run on you. They will try their hardest to prove that they are more physically tougher than you are. They are superior, that they can control you. However, their wide receiver room and their skill positions overall, so running back, not so much, but even secondary, their skill positions are weaker and are less than desired for a national championship favorite like Texas or Ohio State. That's why they're plus 2,800 in odds, which is 11th. They're plus 900 in Big Ten odds, which is 4th, significantly behind Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State, but they're much closer to those schools than they are to the teams next in line, USC, Nebraska, Indiana, who I think are, plus 2,500 or something. Michigan's schedule, you got week 1 hosting New Mexico, week 2 playing at Oklahoma, week 3 hosting Central Michigan, week 4 at Nebraska to open up Big Ten Conference play, weeks 3 and 4 Sherrone Moore will probably be suspended for. You get a bye in week 5, week 6 you host Wisconsin, week 7 you travel on the road to play USC, week 8 you host Washington, you play at Michigan State in week 9, then host Purdue in week 10. You get a bye in week 11 before playing Northwestern in Wrigley Field like Ohio State did last year in week 12, traveling to Maryland in week 13, which used to be a tradition for Michigan. You travel to Maryland, or Maryland, not Maryland comes to you. You travel to Maryland before you play Ohio State. It's like this weird Big Ten tradition. And then you host Ohio State in week 14. So over under win total 8.5. It's juiced, I believe, to the over. So Michigan 9-3, 8-4 is viewed as the most likely records, with 9-3 the most likely, 8-4 second most likely. From there, it probably bounces to 10-2, 7-5, and then we could talk about that all day. But Michigan is strong at D-line, even with all they lost. They're very strong at linebacker. They have 4 seniors there. At secondary, they bring back most of their production there because Johnson was hurt last year, and they get Rod Moore back. You get Martindale in his second year. The O-line, we saw it in the spring game. We've heard it in reports. Very much like last year. Probably a little bit better in all facets, but still questionable at pass block, good at run block. I would actually say pretty darn good at run blocking. Tight end, there's a big drop-off. Wide receiver, I made this analogy, and please don't think that I'm, being that I'm being facetious here or that I am exaggerating. Michigan's wide receivers are genuinely like Dollar Tree clearance level wide receivers. I mean, Harrison Wallace and maybe Amari Evans would be competing for wide receiver number 1 for Michigan right now, and I'm pretty sure Penn State kicked them, especially Evans, to the curb. But quarterback has a chance to either be one of the best in the country or just good. I don't think Bryce Underwood is going to be as bad or worse than Joe Milton or Alex Orji or Davis Warren or Jack Tuttle or even Cade McNamara. Heck, he'll probably be the same or better than Shea Patterson, just from what I've seen, what I've watched, and who he was in high school. Speaking of who he was in high school, let me tell you about Bryce Underwood in high school. He was from Belleville, Michigan, number 1 player in the 2025 class with a 100 grade. 6'4", 208 pounds is his height and weight. In high school, all time, so all four years there where he started, 11,488 passing yards, 152 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 27 rushing touchdowns. His comp is Vince Young, who at Texas under Mac Brown won a title, was constantly in the conversation every year he started there for winning a title, had 6,040 passing yards, 44 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 3,127 rushing yards, 37 rushing touchdowns. Something about that number makes me feel like I'm wrong about the TDI-INT ratio for Vince Young. Let me just briefly check that. Oh, 44 and 28. I missed on the 11. I don't know why I typed that for some reason, but 44 passing touchdowns was correct. 28 interceptions. At over 3,000 rushing yards, though, and 37 rushing touchdowns. And the game has changed a lot. I think that quarterbacks today are more highly efficient, especially in passing, than they were, at around the time of Vince Young. And you see that in, passer ratings and QBRs, and even in the NFL, you see those things improve. And Underwood can succeed because even though I think his wide receiver core is bad, the rushing offense should be great. That's why Michigan brought in 2 running backs in the portal, even though they already had 2 great ones. The O-line is experienced. And the best defense he might play in the whole regular season may be the one he faces in practice. So he'll get pressured. He'll experience, real game conditions, not in terms of, players trying to, kill him with their helmets, like targeting or in crowd noise, but he'll be facing a really good defense. It's hard to project where he will be because ultimately Underwood is, well, a freshman. So it will be challenging to gauge where he will be, but I'm pretty sure that he's going to be good in year one. I'm confident that he'll be a good, great quarterback. Could even be elite or near elite. Maybe he could even be worse than good and just above average. But I don't think his floor is anything worse than an average or above average quarterback. The type of impact he could have on Michigan is, instead of Michigan looking to the portal and thinking, can we even go 9-3 or 10-2, if Underwood pans out and the defense holds onto its improvements from last season, you're talking about Michigan probably not winning it all because they have too many limitations, but you're talking about them maybe having the season that Oregon did last year, where they win some close games, they go undefeated in the regular season, reality probably hits them in the playoffs and their limitations catch up to them, but they could win the Big Ten, absolutely. They could get a bye in the playoffs or get a home game in the playoffs, not just struggle to reach it and maybe sneak in like you'd expect if they got a less talented quarterback out of the portal. There's a lot of boom or bust with Underwood, and the good news for Michigan is you can't really bust here because of what you had last year, where you had a 6th or 7th year guy who couldn't even start at Indiana in Jack Tuttle try to start for you. You had Davis Warren, who was a walk-on, who due to, his illnesses, cancer, things that he can't control, but that just, that wears on you. That really affects you. That's why it was so admirable and a miracle that he could even play football and at times play competent football for Michigan. And then Alex Orji couldn't even throw a spiral. So you're going from nothing to automatically something. That, along with returning almost 2/3 of your production, is going to help. Now, Michigan lost a lot of their quality production in Will Johnson, in 3 of their defensive linemen, in Colston Loveland, but they also lost, a guy like Josh Preeb or Miles Hinton or Orji and Tuttle. And they also lost, some players in the secondary to the portal and some to graduation like Makari Page, who are replaceable. And Michigan has had a wonderful time recruiting and developing on the defensive line. And they get most of their O-line back. So their identity should be stable. They've upgraded an offensive coordinator. I think that what Underwood gives Michigan is a cautious sense of optimism that they are likely to improve by several steps in 2025 compared to 2024.